Were there moments or maybe certain behaviors or questions that popped up where you thought, wow, this is adoption related and I didn't see this coming?
One, not a ton,
Mm.
just transparently, not a ton
Mm-hmm.
things and a ton of things, but I try to be really mindful and aware. I think I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like there's sort of this pressure to like make sure, like monitor all the time. I feel like making sure that I'm not missing something. One thing that surprised me one time was on Father's Day, she wanted to reach out to her birth father, and she hadn't ever before.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. And that was a surprising moment of, I just wondered like where it came from. And we talked about it and she couldn't put a finger on it. So it was fine. No, I'm not, I don't think I've perceived much yet
Yeah.
that's come up that I've yet.
And I want to reiterate, we are talking, you and I, and this is our story, right? Every
Right.
child is different. Their genetic makeup is different. The relationships you have are different. These are two people's insights, right? And
Yeah, for
and
sure.
like you said, you read these other stories that feel horrible to you, and they exist.
But you bring up a good point. It's that if nothing, the openness that we have found, for me at least, what I perceive to be true is that what I think is beneficial about that in raising Grace, and what I believe I'm hoping has made a difference in her life, is that the door is always open for her and there are no secrets at all.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, your go-to guide through the beautiful, complex, and transformative journey of adoption. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through adoption consultant for over a decade, author of the Adoption Roadmap book, and your trusted guide. In each episode, we dive into real experiences, expert insights, and the raw, honest truths that you will need to navigate your journey. Whether you're just beginning, in the thick of it, or well past placement, you'll find support and community here to help you navigate this unique path with confidence and love. Adoption isn't all rainbows and butterflies. It is life-changing and worth every bit of effort. Let's learn, grow, and journey together on the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Welcome back to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined once again by the thoughtful and insightful, my good friend, Kerry Hackett.
Good morning.
If you've been with us for a while, you know that Kerry is an adoptive parent, a fierce advocate for ethical adoption, and someone who brings honesty and heart to every conversation. We'll keep it real. Today, we're diving into a topic that's long overdue for more attention: post-adoption support and community. Both Kerry and I have raised our children through adoption. We are still raising them, and they are both teens now. We've seen firsthand how the adoption journey continues to evolve, bring new challenges and questions we couldn't have imagined early on. Together, we'll reflect on what's been missing, what families need most after placement, and why ongoing connection is so critical. And we have something exciting to share. We will soon be launching our new membership community, the Adoption Continuum, a space for adoptive parents who are looking for real, compassionate, and informed support beyond placement. You're not meant to do this alone, and today's conversation is all about why. Welcome back, Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yay!
Happy to
I'm
have
excited to
you.
be here. Good morning.
Good morning. We have been parenting through adoption for a while now.
It's crazy.
And I really want this just to be a conversation of what we've learned, because we're ahead of most people. So looking back, what has surprised you the most about raising a child through adoption?
Oh my gosh. It's funny when we were talking about that question before, it struck me. I was like, what has surprised me? I mean, first of all, I have been extremely fortunate. And my relationship with Grace's birth family, both her birth mother and her birth father. So what surprised me about that, I guess I didn't expect it to, not that I expected it to go badly, but I didn't expect this overwhelming like love for her birth family. Not that, I mean, why wouldn't you love them? But I
No.
guess I just didn't, it wasn't a factor that, I guess I don't feel like I read a ton about like the side of having a birth family that like you adore. You read more, I mean,
Mhm.
truthfully more, it's about the problems, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I was very surprised. Like I adore her birth family. We talk to each other all the time. In fact, I'd argue I talk to them more than Grace does. So that was surprising. I think I was surprised, and this maybe goes also to being a single parent as well as an adoptive parent. But I think I was surprised that like things have gone okay. And she's like, I think I maybe expected more challenges to come so far. And I keep waiting for like a shoe to drop, but I feel like she's doing pretty well. Like we have very transparent discussions about adoption.
Yeah.
There's like nothing that I don't talk about with Grace. And anything that comes up, we tackle it immediately. So there's nothing that we haven't like sort of talked about. And so I think as a result of that, she's, I keep saying this because I'm
I
nervous
know it's
about it,
like
but
you
like,
want to knock on wood.
yes. And
Great.
like appears well adjusted and like, she's a teenager. She just turned a teenager in March. So like, I don't know what's coming, but I think you read so much, there's a lot of negative online, and so I think you sort of wait for like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
When am I going to have to call the therapist? And so far I've been very fortunate and she's doing really well. So I think I've been surprised by those things, like
Awesome.
sort of waiting for another shoe to drop and then the relationship with the birth parents. And also, what else? The other thing that's so surprising to me, and I know you know this, and any adoptive parent will say this, I'm pretty sure. Every single time, and I'm not kidding you, every time I mention that I'm a parent through adoption, it doesn't always come up that way.
Mhm.
You just say you have a 13-year-old, but sometimes it comes up that you're an adoptive parent. Someone is touched by it.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily I'm an adoptive parent. It's my brother's adopted, my cousin's adopted. Oh, my aunt is in the middle of adopting. I cannot tell you. And it's just, so it's this network of people. And I feel like it's almost like this, you just don't even, it blows my mind how many times people are touched by adoption when I bring it up.
It's like you're part of a secret community that's not so secret.
Yeah. And then you start talking about it and people are like, oh yeah, me too, or my cousin, and you end up just having these wonderful bonds with people because it's just this very special community. And I just have had magnificent experiences talking to people about their stories.
I love that.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay.
I
love that you said that everybody has a connection. I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say everyone's like, oh, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah, we get that too. Of course. That's like par for the course, right? Like,
I don't know what to say to that. It is amazing. I feel like it is amazing, but they say it like, oh, you saved a child.
No,
and that's
yeah.
where I'm like, okay, what do I, don't I, what do I say? Do I feel like
what I say?
Yeah, what do you say?
I don't say, like, I get the same all the time. Like, oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. I will say that what I say is, I'm the blessed one.
Yeah.
I'm the blessed one. I'm blessed that this occurred.
Yeah. I say that too.
And that I was blessed to be chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to say as well, because this first of all, it isn't about, I'm so lucky that Grace's birth mom selected me in the scheme of life. I'll never be more blessed than by that. Yeah. So, no, and I feel the same way. I feel kind of weird about that when people are like, oh, you said, I didn't actually, I didn't, that's not actually accurate. She
Yeah.
has a wonderful birth mother who by time and circumstance could not parent.
Yep.
And she's a wonderful woman and her family's wonderful. And the other children she's raising are wonderful.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. It
I
would have been a
disagree.
different life, but not
That's exactly
necessarily
right.
a bad life.
That's exactly right.
Another thing that surprised me, and I'm also a single mom through adoption, as most of you know, if you've been listening to me. I never thought my son's birth father would come into the picture.
Mm,
And I was pleasantly surprised, maybe a teeny tiny bit terrified at first because of the
mm,
way it all happened, which is a conversation for inside our community, not for the public. But I am also surprised at how quickly that relationship formed, how close we are, even closer than with my son's birth mom. Also, because he fills a role he doesn't already have. So
yeah.
naturally, he calls his birth father dad, but his birth mom, his birth mom.
Yep.
Um, and
Interesting.
we're really close to him. I mean, it's the nature of their personalities, but also the nature of what my son needed to fill this
Hmm.
void in his life. So it's interesting the differences in how those relationships are
Yep.
different.
And it's, I mean, I've observed it firsthand, so I can just say how amazing it is. And
Yeah.
I can't, I think it's unique. And what a blessing. Like, it's the most, I mean, like, at the bar mitzvah, I was just like, "Ooh, puddles."
At my son's
Um,
bar mitzvah. Yeah.
yes, it was just the most
Yeah.
beautiful
He
thing I've
was
really ever
there.
seen. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what a huge blessing. It's amazing.
It is a blessing. Were there moments or maybe certain behaviors or questions that popped up where you thought, wow, this is adoption related and I didn't see this coming? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. Were there moments or maybe certain behaviors or questions that popped up where you thought, wow, this is adoption related and I didn't see this coming?
One, not a ton,
Mm.
just transparently, not a ton
Mm-hmm.
things and a ton of things, but I try to be really mindful and aware. I think I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like there's sort of this pressure to like make sure, like monitor all the time. I feel like making sure that I'm not missing something. You know, Grace is very happy and, like funny. And you read these stories and you're just like, you get worried, like, okay, is everything really okay?
Mm-hmm.
you know, one thing that surprised me one time was, on Father's Day, she wanted to reach out to her birth father and she hadn't ever before.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting. And unfortunately, it was during a time that we weren't were in contact because sometimes it ebbs and flows a little bit. That was a surprising moment of, I just wondered like where it came from, and we talked about it, and she couldn't put a finger on it, so it was fine. I mean, like of course the door is always open, and it at that time we just weren't in touch. But
Yeah.
no, I'm not. I don't think I've perceived much yet,
Yeah.
that's come up that I've yet.
I and I want to reiterate, we are talking, you and I, and this is our story, right? Every
Right.
child is different. Their genetic makeup is different. The relationships you have are different. These are two people's insights, right? and
Yeah, for
and
sure.
like you said, you read these other stories that feel horrible to you, and they exist.
Yeah.
I think, partially maybe we've had it great because of the way we have tackled the openness from the beginning, but I don't know. Maybe
I
not.
don't know either. But you bring up a good point. It's that if nothing, the openness that we have found through, like I would say we talked to Grace's birth mother more, and you probably talked to Trey's birth father more. It For me at least, what I perceive to be true is that what I think is beneficial about that in raising Grace, and what I believe I'm hoping has made a difference in her life, is that the door is always open for her and
Yeah.
there are no secrets at all.
Hmm.
There's nothing she doesn't know about her situation when she was brought into the world.
Hmm.
I've told her the story a million times. And even she's heard it from Angie's mouth herself when they
Hmm.
had alone time. And I think that that's one hurdle that has to have helped, that because I know sometimes there's no ability, the birth parent is available, it's a closed adoption. I do think that helped a little bit in the in sort of like wondering. I feel like at least with that, there's one thing that is not in their minds, and that's the wondering.
Yeah.
Like there's no, at least from what I know so far in my life with my daughter, there has not been a question that I've not answered yet.
Yeah.
And so that's got to help a little bit,
But I don't think that
You
doesn't
don't think?
mean there isn't wondering, because even though we experience all the same things, I
Yeah.
have asked my son, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if you lived with your dad?"
Oh,
And
oh,
he said, "Yeah,
yeah.
I have." And I was, okay, great. That's totally normal.
I guess I meant wondering
Yeah,
about the
who they
facts of her
are.
life. Yes, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I'm positive there's wondering about that.
Yeah.
Because she has Grace on our side has, 6 brothers and sisters on her birth mom side. So I'm sure she's thought about that, especially being an only child. But at least the facts of her life, and her story
Yeah.
are not
Oh my
question
God.
marks.
You said she has 6 brothers and sisters just on one side, and my son has 7 brothers and sisters on 2 sides. And there's a movie out right now about a man who's donated sperm who has created
Oh, I
1,000
saw
children.
I saw it.
And
It's
I'm
crazy.
like, wow, I think 6 is a lot. And
Yeah.
and I was just, it couldn't get through the first episode, but I was just thinking about uh, how complicated and awful,
Mhm.
and about walking through the world wondering, am I
Yeah.
about to sleep with my brother or sister? Like, who are you? Like in relationships and everything, how
Yeah,
cognizant you need to be. And
for
that
sure.
goes, if you're in a closed adoption, you don't know. You don't know how many
No.
brothers and sisters you have. You don't know
Mm-mm.
in your, when you
Yeah.
start dating, you do have to wonder,
Yeah, for
could this
sure.
person be a relative of mine? And listen, that's
It could
something that's never
Hey, listen,
talked about.
it could happen to
Yeah.
non-adoptees. Come on. You see that on all the stories about 23andMe, right?
Right.
Like long lost brother
Oh,
that I didn't know
geez.
about, you know?
Ooh, this conversation is taking a direction I didn't
Yeah,
expect, but um,
big surprise with us,
yeah.
but anyway.
I'm bringing it back. There has been a lot in our lives that has definitely been adoption related. And the first one I can remember was when my son was 3 years old, which I have come to learn that's one of the developmental stages, like one of the very first times where an adoptee it'll start to sink in and they'll start to
Mhm.
understand it. And I didn't know this at the time, but um it was the Lion King's Circle of Life or something, or it had to do with the
Oh.
Circle of Life. And for some reason, that struck a chord with him, and it
Mm.
and it triggered something in him to make all these
Mhm.
stories that I had been telling him about how you came to me through adoption and blah, blah, blah. And it was all kind of sinking in, that and him noticing that people were different. Oh, somebody on the street looks like me. They have the same color as me. And that look,
Oh, yeah.
but
That was a big deal when Grace was
suddenly
little.
at 3 years old, and my son never cried. He cried uncontrollably for about 45 minutes, and I didn't
Mhm.
know why. And it
Yeah.
was only the next day where I think I asked him a question or something, and he brought up that song, Circle of Life, and how it,
Mm.
I can't remember what he said, but how it triggered him, or how he was so sad that that the baby lost his mommy, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was like, aha, he's putting his adoption story together. So
Mm.
it was this moment that I'll never forget. It was the
Yeah.
very first time. And there have been moments throughout his life where
Mhm.
he has felt singled out, or
Mm.
like he doesn't fit in, and he would make up stories about people treating him different. At
Oh,
least maybe in his head he wasn't, but that I knew were adoption related, that
yeah.
I didn't necessarily see coming.
Yeah. And do you remember me telling you about a similar story for Grace? Do you remember that at
Uh,
all? So, um, we were, God, I wish I could remember the movie, but we watched a lot of movies when she was a
yeah.
baby, when she was younger, but probably around the same age. And it was like about a girl who was trying to find her mom. And oh my God, I wish I could remember the movie, but I literally can't. But anyway, very similar story. And she was just, this girl was trying to find her mom, and Grace was just crying and crying
Mm.
and crying and crying. And I, I kind of had a gut feeling about what it was about. And I just held her and, talked to her
Yeah,
about it, but she wasn't able necessarily to articulate like what
sure.
was going on, but I knew what was going on. So I do remember that situation. And then, a lot of, especially when she was younger, and I'm sure she did it with you when we were out, like she is biracial and African American and Caucasian. And so if she would see a Black person, she would literally say out loud, "He looks like me."
Yeah.
And luckily people were very kind and smiled and laughed and rubbed her head and walked away. But so we had a lot of that. And then even when she was going through grade school, especially like I would say first through like third grade, maybe even fourth, she would every new year, she would make comments about like there are a lot of brown kids in my class. And certainly early on did not distinguish cultures. So her school has a nice mix of cultures, so it's African American and Indian and Hispanic. And so she in her early years associated brown with like me, and so it was really cute. And so every year she would sort of report back like there are a lot of brown kids in my
Oh,
class,
I love that.
which was very sweet. So yeah, definitely notices, and even now, as a teenager, she's a competitive dancer, and she's the only Black girl on her team, and it's, I don't know how many people it is. It's probably about 50 girls or something like that.
Hmm.
um, and has gotten specific roles in some of the
Oh,
songs
interesting.
because of that. And the dance dance team, the dance studio owner asked me about it before deciding on, like, one was featuring Rosa Parks, one was about like Black women being seen, because my friend who runs this dance studio likes to talk about culturally relevant, likes to have them dance about things that are culturally relevant.
Yeah.
And at the time, we're going through a lot during COVID and after COVID, from a like race relation perspective. And so she was doing some dances on that. And she came to me and said, how would you feel about it? I said, well, let me talk to Grace. And, Grace was like, great, let me be featured, my daughter, the performer, but definitely, knows that that's different,
Yeah.
so
Interesting.
interesting stuff like that that's just come up. And I asked her, and she said to me about like even her hair, she'll say, like people always want to touch my hair. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? You don't have to, you don't have to let anybody touch you, period. And if you're not comfortable with that, you need to say it, and she's like, no, I don't really care. I mean, I have great hair, like she just,
She's
and
so confident.
she's pretty confident. So she really, every now and then I wonder if like she's fronting, like underneath that it really
Yeah.
bothers her. So I'm always like, well, you don't have to be okay with it, like, and she's like, no, I don't really care. I'm like, oh, so, we'll see if that comes up again sometime where she cares. But right
Yeah.
now, but so stuff, little things here and there, will come up. And,
Has your
you know,
conversation with her as a teenager now around adoption changed, or do you think she's approaching it any differently? Like, what changes have you seen around the
yeah,
adoption theme with her?
yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I feel like she's more, maybe it comes up like she's more open to sort of like talk about it. Um, in fact, she had a sleepover the other day and her friends were doing like who knows who best or whatever. And well, it's a different parenting story about Grace having sleepovers, and like she like is on her own with her friends, but then eventually like wants me to come in and hang out with them. It's pretty cute. So I came in for a period of the time and they wanted to do like who knows me best. And the girls, it was like, a bunch of girls. And adoption came up, and like I think like something about like who knows, the adoption story or something like that. And one girl knew it and one girl didn't. Anyway, she's like a little bit more I don't know, maybe willing to like bring it up and not necessarily, it's not like she was hiding it before, but I feel like it's more frequently mentioned pretty comfortably. I don't know. I'm not sure what to attribute to it, but it just doesn't seem to be, it just seems to come up a little bit more in conversation. Maybe it's as they're like exploring themselves as teenagers. I think it's like part of what's naturally happening to her as a teenager. Um, and so her story maybe is coming up a little bit more. I'm not sure.
That's interesting.
I can't figure it out, but it's, she's open and I feel like it's like mentioned a little bit more.
I feel
I
like
don't
it's
know.
opposite with my son.
Oh, interesting.
I feel like when he
Wow.
was little, I think, and I have to pay a little bit more attention or even ask him about it, but when
Okay.
he was little, like for National Adoption Awareness Day or whatever, with the
Oh,
smiley
yeah.
face on his hand, he
Yeah.
would go to kindergarten and have all the kids put smiley faces on their hands and
Oh,
blah, blah, blah. And now I feel like I've asked him, do your friends know that you're adopted, or do you get questions about why
yeah.
I'm white? And he's like, no. And I think he just doesn't initiate it. If somebody asks him, he might answer flippantly. Um,
Uh,
he went through this period definitely of not wanting to feel different, and he did. And I think he struggled with that a lot. I
mm,
also knew, because of what I kept hearing from adoptees, how important having a therapist was. So I got him a therapist.
mm,
It's been a couple of years now, and he finally has somebody that he enjoys talking to. Um, and he actually wants to go. So
huh.
I don't know. I just lost my train of thought because of these two dogs behind me playing. But
It's
anyways, I
funny.
don't think he brings it up as much. And also, we just switched from a private school where I think more
Oh,
people
right.
knew his story to a public school where there are a lot of kids with single moms, and there are a
Mm,
lot of, different types of families.
yeah.
Um, and so maybe he doesn't feel the need because maybe he feels like he fits in more. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something to definitely pay attention to and to ask him about. The other thing that changes is he, I love now that he will go and just text his family, his birth
Mm,
family, on his own, only on his dad's side, not on his mom's side. But he'll be texting, he'll be like, "Oh, I'm texting my dad," or "I'm texting my sister." And
oh,
he
oh.
does openly talk about his sisters and brothers. He
Mm.
does openly.
Grace does too. She'll say to people, I have 6 brothers and sisters. And people be like, wait, what? I thought you were an only
I
child.
know. And that has always been, by the way, more
Same.
important to him than anything else. He has
Isn't that
always
funny?
just wanted siblings.
Same, 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 same. Yeah. And it's funny because I don't know that, I was, as you're talking, I'm like trying to think about like what that might be. And I think for Grace, maybe it's just more comfort maybe it's just like more comfortable for her to state the facts about her life, and maybe younger she just didn't. I don't
I
know.
think it's a
You know,
girl boy thing. And I also think, she has a lot of confidence. My son is a little bit more, shy and
yeah,
internal, and she's very external and lives out loud. And I love
yeah,
that
yeah,
about her. Um,
yeah.
and I've also, I finally felt like he was old enough to hear the hard parts of his story. And
Mm-hmm.
the more, when his father came into his life, into our lives, and the more I built a relationship with him, the more I started hearing more of the story. The story unfolded a little bit more. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted to plug my ears and go, la, 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 la. Like, I don't want to know,
Mm,
because the more I know, the more I need to tell him.
yeah.
Um, and so I did. I kind of told him all the hard parts, the parts I knew, the parts I learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that rocked his world. That rocked his world for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And, I remember him saying just like something about how his whole world just changed with that information. And that was really hard.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. And inevitably, there will be things like that
yeah.
in our children's lives, and moments that we're probably not prepared for. I think, we do a lot of talking about, we're a transracial adoptive family. We live in the suburbs of Chicago. I would say, we have a diverse community, but not super diverse. Her school is pretty diverse, but the actual like surrounding, like
Hmm.
right where we live, is not necessarily super diverse. Some of her friends live in very, not diverse at all communities. So
Hmm.
we've had a lot of hard talks about, like, you have to be mindful of those things. Um, how the world sees you, and how you, you know we had to have the talk, of, that
Yeah.
most parents of, children of color have to have with their children, about the universe we live in and how it will treat them. And I think, I think invariably something is going to come up that's going to be rough for them. And so I don't know about you, but I've been trying to prepare Grace, you know, all the time, for just in case. I want you to remember, this is what the world is like out
We
there. And
watch
we've
cop
been,
shows, so it's great. They do all the teaching for me.
oh my
And
God.
I just reiterate it.
We watched this show called, oh God, Family Reunion. Did you ever watch
No,
that?
but I've heard of it.
Oh, it was I'm telling you, it was a great show for us. And there was a scene about, the kids getting stopped by the
Yeah.
cops while they were trying to get in their house because they forgot the keys and blah, blah, blah. And they had a lot of money on them because they were cutting lawns. And so we had a
Mm,
whole conversation about that. She never forgot that story.
yeah.
Never, ever forgot. So, all those hard conversations. And like you, the blessing is, and I think for adoptive parents in general, and you read about this, through, if you're doing any research on adopting, is just about being ready and available to them when those things hit,
Yeah.
and being ready to find any resource that you don't already have, to help them through that. And like, to your point, finding a therapist when it was time, offering that, or, and I've even made clear to Grace, like, if you don't want to talk to me, you have your aunts, you have your cousins, like, you can talk to, there are a lot of people down the line if I'm not first,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to do it with me, I want you to know who's
Yeah.
next in
Good
line, and after
point.
that, and after that, and after that,
Yeah. Yeah. What
I don't
about
know where I
for
was going with that,
no,
but
well, no, I think that is important, whether it's a therapist or other people. And there will be, like, our kids are teenagers. We're probably not the first people they want to talk to. It's probably
no.
their friends,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
eventually it
sure.
will be, but they should also know that there are other people. But I'm
Yeah.
curious personally, like for
Mhm.
Kerry,
Yeah.
what emotional challenges have come up for you that maybe you weren't expecting as an adoptive parent? Before we go on, I'm going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We have so much more to cover. Hey, parents, real talk for a second. Ever find yourself wondering, am I doing this right? Feeling disconnected, overwhelmed, or like your child's needs just don't show up in the parenting books that don't exist? Yeah, I see you. I am you. Parenting through adoption comes with its own nuances, challenges, and moments that most people simply don't talk about because let's face it, we don't usually want people knowing that we're struggling, or sometimes we don't even know who to celebrate with, somebody who truly gets it. Introducing the Adoption Continuum. This isn't just another parenting group, it's your village, a trusted, judgment free, expert guided community built specifically for you, adoptive parents. Inside, you'll find expert advice and practical strategies tailored for adoptive parenting, live workshops covering everything from attachment to identity, a private, supportive community of parents who get it, consistently updated content and tools to help you grow with your child confidently. Whether you're in the thick of toddler meltdowns or navigating teenage identity struggles, you don't have to do this alone. For a limited time, you can become a founding member at the lowest cost it will ever be. But once the doors close, that rate disappears for good and the doors won't reopen for a while. Want in? Don't wait. Get on our waitlist today so you don't miss the founder's launch of the Adoption Continuum, where kindness, vulnerability, gratitude, and accountability create a space for you to thrive and your child to flourish. Email support@rgadoptionconsulting.com with waitlist in the subject line, or simply click the link in the show notes and we'll make sure you get all the details. The Adoption Continuum, so you don't have to do adoptive parenting alone. But I'm curious personally, like for Kerry, what emotional challenges have come up for you that maybe you weren't expecting as an adoptive parent?
It's funny. I think it's more, honestly, the thing that first comes to mind is more about single parenting than it is about adoption. You know what I mean? Like, emotional challenges from adoption.
I
I'm
know
not re-
I can think of
like,
like
give me an
one
example. I guess
instance.
I'm not. I don't know. I can't think of one offhand immediately.
Well, I remember once, and I know that there were a couple times that we talked and it was really heavy conversations, but I remember the very first time you had a visit from her birth mom and
Yeah.
sibling, and
Hmm.
how you didn't know how to handle it or
Yeah.
if she should stay with you. And I know you were
Yeah.
grappling around that, and I don't know.
Yeah. That's a good example. And thank you for reminding me of my own memory. I appreciate that. Yes, we had her birth mom and one of her birth sisters come here. And oh my God, I did all this homework because I was so anxious about it. And I think the anxiety was related to just, I think I was worried about both parties. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I was overwhelmed with how do I make sure that this is okay for Grace? And I also had a tremendous amount of worry about her birth mom. I'm protective of her birth mom. You know, I have this place in my heart for Angie, and so I wanted to make sure that I was monitoring both worlds. You know what I mean? So it's a great example of just trying to know how to handle these situations. And literally, I was online doing homework, how to handle the first, meeting of the birth
Mhm.
mom, with your child. Where, like literally, it was things like, your make sure your child has a place to go that's really comfortable for them if they need to get away, or they need a place to sort of
Yeah.
process what's happening. Like when we went to visit her birth mom, they suggested stay in your own hotel. Make sure that you have a place for just the two of you to go
Hmm.
back and process things like that. Great advice that I got when they came to visit, and again, like in online communities, which we'll talk about soon, is have activities planned when the conversation ebbs and flows, which it did.
Mm.
And so we had a bunch. I literally went to Michael's and bought a bunch of crap because Grace was younger at the time and those kind of things were interesting. There was no phone at the time. Um, And so I had a bunch of like crafts, and we literally ended up doing that because there were some times that like the conversation sort of, ebbed. So things like that. And I think it was the anxiety about, and it could have to do with a little bit of my own personality, like people pleasing. Like I wanted everybody to be okay. I was so worried about everybody being all right. So I definitely think that's part of it. And even I would say the other part of emotion, now that you got me thinking about it, um, is just a wanting for the relationships with her birth parents to remain open. Like a surprising thing that's happened recently is, so her birth father, we didn't talk to him for a little while, and then he sort of resurfaced, and very surprised by sort of Grace, sort of being like, yeah, I'll talk to him at some point, and not necessarily really wanting to rush to talk to him. And how to manage that, and feeling a little awkward about it. How do I do this? How do I make sure that, I'm not like sort of hurting his feelings, and I'm also not pushing anything on Grace. And so that navigation is hard. It's
It
like,
is.
it's a really interesting balance, and learning how, and really researching how to do that well. And the only people that understand and can talk about that are other adoptive families. And,
100%.
and on top of that, not only other adoptive families, but because of the uniqueness of every adoptive family, you really have to find someone who has that very similar situation, right? So like I couldn't even ask you for help on that because your relationship with his birth father is completely different than my relationship with Grace's birth father.
Right.
So you couldn't advise me on that. So I literally would have to find someone who has the exact sort of same situation,
Yep.
which is very niche.
Yeah. And
And
yet there are a lot of people out there when you're
right.
in
And you
community.
got to find them,
Right.
right?
It's just like when you share your family is through adoption, you find all these other people who also relate. When you're in community, you share one thing and there's a lot of people that can relate. But
Yeah.
one very common story is the in and out communication and being
Yeah.
present and then being not present and then coming
Mhm.
back. And I think one thing that surprised me, there's a couple of things that come to mind as you're talking. One is navigating that and having me care more than my son sometimes. And that whole thing, like, should I care more than him? Should he know that I
Yep.
care more than him? And I was also surprised because there was a 2-year period at the beginning where mom wasn't there and then she was back and I was so excited and I
Mhm.
never expected her to be, non-reachable again. And we're in this
Yeah.
period where I'm like, where did you go? And I think it has something to do with phones and not having phones and numbers changing. And
Mhm.
these themes are very common.
Yes.
I
Mhm.
love Grace's attitude that, well, I'll talk to him when I talk to him. I'm sure I will,
Yeah.
which is a great attitude to have.
Yeah.
Another thing that has come up that we've been talking about inside of the community, which isn't open to the public yet, but we've beta launched for the RG's private clients, but is a theme around guilt. And talk
Yes.
about an emotional thing that personally I think
Oh,
we all feel it in some way, shape, or form, and it shows up in so many different
oh my
forms.
gosh. Mhm.
But yeah, like I'm awful at sending things in the mail. I'm awful at sending gifts and cards, but I will always
Mhm.
call, I will always text. I could
Yeah.
send you a gift card, but I am
Yeah.
so awful about that. And so, especially we're about to come up on Mother's Day, and I have sent gifts and I do it periodically and everything. I'm just not great
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
And I feel more guilty around the relationship with Trey's birth families than maybe I do with a best friend or a
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
member or my sister or
Yeah.
whatever. Why do I feel a
I
different pull? Like I feel like I owe something more and then I have to prove myself again and again and again. And the other place that it comes up is around feeling like I feel like I need to not piss Trey off ever, so much so that he will one day leave and not want to come back to me because
Oh,
I'm the adoptive parent, not the parent.
oh,
Do you know what
wow.
I mean? That's
Yeah.
always lingering in the back of my head because
Really?
I see the adoptive community sometimes, and I see how sometimes they talk about their adoptive family or how
Wow.
anti-adoption they are, and that does not leave my head. So guilt,
Really?
and then
Okay.
that whole thing of, am I doing it well enough? Am I doing it well enough to keep
Yeah.
him coming back?
Wow. I mean, well, I think that the guilt thing is massive. On your second topic, I I have not ever thought that in my
Good.
life. And maybe I'll be surprised. Who knows? But I don't know. I feel like I think and I
That's
just
because
feel
you're a
like
better
our
parent than
relationship.
me.
No, I'm not at all. Oh my God, not a chance. I think that I just feel like our bond is this mystical, magical, blessed. Like I just feel like we are tethered.
Yeah, and
And
yet sometimes I know I push his buttons so much, or maybe he'll say that thing to
yeah.
me that I'm like, "Oh my god, did I lose him the second he walks out? Did I lose him?"
Hmm.
Because
Oh,
you hear so
but I
many of
will
those
say,
stories.
yeah, I will say the guilt thing is huge. And when you're talking about it, I'm thinking, similarly that I feel like the guilt thing is, here's how I would articulate it for myself is I feel like it's about just being so incredibly thankful for being selected to raise this child.
Yeah.
And I feel a sense of, well, first I've always wanted to be a mom, and I had my own challenges growing up.
Mhm.
And so I had a certain mentality about how I wanted to parent, um, given some of the challenges that I had as a child. So I already had sort of this mindset about how I was going to raise my child, what I was going to do different, all that stuff.
Mhm.
So that was already sort of sitting on my shoulders about
Mhm.
how I was going to parent differently than how I had been parented. One, two, I'm so thankful that I feel a deep, deep um, feeling of wanting her birth parents to know that I am doing everything humanly possible in my power to give her a good life.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, and again, it goes back to sort of this feeling for her birth parents of, I want them to sleep at night well,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I can't imagine how difficult that decision was.
Right.
There's no way I could imagine it. It's the most brave, I imagine, heart-wrenching decision a person could make, and not an easy one made. And so I guess I always want them to know that their choice to decide on me was a good one, and that
Right.
she is having a wonderful life, that she's happy, that she's loved, that she's getting educated, that she's just loved by so many human beings.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that it comes often in the form of guilt, like you feel like, oh God, I just want you to know it's okay and she's okay and it's all going to be okay. And I promise I'll do everything I can. So it's always on your shoulders. It
Always
just,
on your shoulders. And
you know,
it's a heavy
so
load to
it's the
carry
parent guilt.
sometimes.
I'm Catholic too. That doesn't
Right.
help. But like it's the parent guilt. And then it's also the guilt of this feeling for these people who chose to let you parent their child,
Yeah.
So I think it's like a double whammy.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about assumptions and myths.
Mm, okay.
So, there are so many assumptions that when we first start out, or when we first start out our journey, or when we
Oh,
first become
oh my gosh.
parents, that we make. So, now looking back, what were some of those assumptions or myths
Yeah.
that you realize, not so much?
Oh my gosh. I think that, I mean, bef you and I did a lot of homework before we adopted. Like you and I just naturally, researched
Mhm.
everything we could get our hands on and joined groups. And, back when we adopted, they were like list serves,
Yeah.
remember? Where you would get that roll up. Oh my God. Wow. Antiquated. So it's different these days, shows our age and how old our children are. But so many assumptions because the story in the perceptions about adoption are just so like, I mean, it's like any other stereotype. It's like, you know, um, this is what you hear. Was the mother young?
Yeah.
Was she
Was
really
she on
young?
drugs?
Yeah. Was she on drugs? Is she in jail? You know, like a lot of those stories. So number one, all those crazy assumptions. And I love busting them because I'm always like, no, those are stories that you read online. You're wrong. And there are some stories like that, of course. I
Right.
mean, there's every kind of story for a reason that a family decides to make an adoption plan.
Right.
So a lot of those assumptions about what adoption is, a lot of things about, you know, this child will never love me. Like, well, how well, you know, that they won't love me. I'm not really her mom. You know what I mean? A lot of assumptions about that and about, being enmeshed and being engaged with your child and how it'll never be,
Mm-hmm.
the same as a birth parent. And I think that that's a lot of assumptions. And then just about the negativity. There's a lot of negativity about like, it's going to be rough. Get ready. It's going to be really rough raising an adoptive child. Or the assumptions for me specifically about how long it will take.
Yeah.
It'll take 10 years,
Yep.
and for me it was 3 months. So things like that. So, it's sort of like in life, you can't count on every assumption can be busted by something else. You know what I mean? Like, so I just feel like you can't follow any assumptions that people have about adoption or about being a single parent or about being a parent in general. You know what I mean? Like, it's stereotypes that I think lead into a lot.
Assumed that as soon as I adopted, I would find my husband.
Oh, wow. Oh,
I'm still looking.
yeah, I was not holding out for that. I'm still not.
Anyone out in the world who has found my husband, I'm gonna give him a good catch.
Yeah, we both are. Bring us up.
We got 2 single mamas here. The blonde, the brunette, the Jew, the Catholic. You got your pick, right? The Hispanic child, the black child, whatever they want.
Bring it. Yeah. Well, I joke that I'm looking for an old man with good investments.
Yeah.
With a bad cough.
Oh my God.
Old man, good investments, bad cough.
Do we really want to air this?
Or bad heart.
Do we really?
Whatever.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. Okay.
Grace would not have it, especially when I've said, like, I think I might go back online. Maybe date. No, I like it just us.
Oh,
like,
I love that. That's amazing. I will. Although, that's an interesting thing too. Like dating as a single mom through adoption where there's no father involved. Number one, I've never been shy to tell my child I'm going on a date, and I'll show him pictures and I'll be like, what about him? And of course, like I'll show him the most insane picture of somebody and he'll be like, well, is he nice? I'm like, can't you just say no? Look at him. Well, is he nice? He has the kindest heart, my son.
Oh my gosh, he really
beautiful heart.
And you can take credit for raising him that way.
Yes, that I will take credit for.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Grace, I remember when I broached the topic with her when she was sort of old enough to understand it, and she was like, no, I like our setup.
Yeah, I love that. And I think,
and lucky for her, nothing's happened, so she doesn't have to worry about it. But it's
I know
cute.
It has to be hard. Like, on the one hand, there's a lot of adoptive parents who then get divorced, and that child is going through yet another loss, and that has to be, I don't know.
Is it not working out?
Yeah, maybe I'll have a guest on that one time, but luckily we don't have to deal with that, and so we've given them the
luckily we haven't met anybody.
we just fight with them instead of our spouse.
Oh my God. Especially now with with the eye rolls and the battles, it's fun.
Why do you think that so many adoptive parents, and I think it's more at the beginning, but I don't know, maybe even ongoing, why do you think they underestimate how important ongoing education and community are throughout the child's development? And what would you tell them?
Oh God. Because I have not been perfect at this. Just to be honest, I have not been great at it. I think because I remain connected to the community, I learn that way. I wouldn't say I'm like taking classes anymore.
Yeah.
I think I did a lot of that earlier on. Here's what I think. And it could be a lazy answer, truthfully, but I feel like you just get wrapped up in parenting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just parenting generally. And especially when they're younger, and especially if you're a single parent and you're working full time, it's just like getting through the day. You know what I mean? Like, especially
Totally.
when they're young and they're very, they need so much from you in the beginning. And so I think, I do think that, for my situation, right, raising a girl who has hair that's different than mine, you have to learn how to do that.
Right.
Like you can't put your head in the sand about that topic. You just cannot. If you do, it's like visually apparent. So like there are some things that you have to educate yourself on. And so I think there's some benefits to them being younger, where you have a little bit more time to, like, you have to learn those things to get along in life. But then I think you just get wrapped up in parenting. But I think if you have a connection, a thread somewhere where you can stay connected to the community, not necessarily ongoing education, like let me go take a class every year or every month.
You learn so much by being in a community.
You learn so much, and you have a place to rely on to be able to, sort of talk to someone that gets it.
Yeah.
Is fantastic. But I think you get wrapped up in just being a parent and getting by in the right. Parenting is hard, no matter what kind of parent you are. But and getting them to school and activities, and it just gets overwhelming. So I think it gets hard. But I do think that it's critical to maintain a connection to the community, so that you have a place to go with the questions that nobody else will be able to answer you. A non-adoptive parent will not be able to help you with an adoptive question. Adoptive family question.
I agree with everything you said. And you can learn, your best education is from other people who are in it with you, or who have done it already, who are ahead of you, right? Like there are so many, and like we've said a couple times, you can't just talk to one person. Right. We're one story. But when you get into a community and you find those people who have had the exact experiences, it's like gold. Right.
Yeah.
So that's number one. But number two, and to kind of go back to that question of why are people resistant? I think that people just don't want to look at their shit. They want to think, not me. This won't happen to me.
Yeah.
And they're living a little bit in la la land.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that you can underestimate when you have a lack of, I'm not saying this right. You can underestimate what could come up. Right. And so by sticking your head in the sand and the not me thing, it can come up and you're not prepared.
Or you just don't want to deal with it. Right.
Yeah. Or you don't want to deal with it. Yeah, for sure.
And let me talk to those parents right now. If you are one of them, and by the way, if you're one of them, okay, fine. Stop and acknowledge that you're one of them right now. It is not too late. Do something about it. Because what I fear for you is that your child is going to hate you later. Yeah. Because you haven't dealt with it. You didn't, you're not anticipating what they could be feeling because you're not bringing these topics up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's lucky thing for them.
Yeah.
That we've thought about this.
Yeah, we have.
And there are places you can go.
We have.
Hey, it's podcast editor Josie here again. And this is going to be a 2-part episode, so be sure to stick around to hear more about our new post-adoption membership support group, the Adoption Continuum, and more honest conversations about what support looks like as your child grows. And now for a sneak peek of part 2.
There are so many topics that everybody deals with, but are very prevalent in the adoption community. Mental health, identity, race, substance exposure, birth family connections. They're hard to talk about and they're awkward and you feel weird asking them. But how important is it to lean into those tough
Well, for sure.
conversations.
Yeah.
You cannot avoid them. I mean, I always joke, if people like were a fly on the wall in my office and heard me like just throwing out, are they Black? Are they white? Are they Hispanic? Well, what race is this baby? Well, does the mom use drugs? Does the, like, and I don't ask with any judgment. I'm just like, I need to know these things.
You
These
need
are
facts.
important topics
Yeah. Yeah.
within
Yeah.
our community. You know, we shouldn't avoid them because they're tough.
Yeah.
We just
And
need the right
ultimately,
spaces.
yeah, and ultimately, it's funny while we're talking about this, I'm just thinking like, and the most beautiful thing about all of those challenges, and about what we're talking about and resources and finding answers, is that it's ultimately about like just adoring your child and wanting the very best you can possibly give to your child in their life experience, and like wanting, you know, every single thing that you do and every decision you make to lead them to a happy, healthy life where they're giving back to the universe, and they're loved by a whole lot of people, and they, you know, they have a wonderful life, because someday we won't be here, you know.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.